This is everything you need to know about permissions inside of Monday.com Enterprise. By the way, if you'd like us to help you set up Monday.com for your business, check out the link in the description below. Anyway, as you can see here, I'm inside of our Monday.com system. This is an enterprise account, not professional, enterprise. And the permission functions between the two levels do vary quite significantly. Now, if you are after complex permissions, Monday.com Enterprise is the best option for you. So you've got a number of different permission options within Monday.com, and I'm going to walk you through an introduction, or I'll walk you through the setup to all of those in this video. So as you can see here, I'm on my clients board. Okay, I've got a few different areas within this system that we're managing a few different things. Now, I want to manage the permissions, let's say on my projects board, for example. I've got revenue, cost, profit, other data points such as who's assigned to what responsibility or who's assigned to what project within this particular board. Now, I want to then look at the permissions to see who has access to what, who can make changes to what within this particular board. So we will go to the three dotted button in the top right hand corner here and head over to our permissions option. And then we have a variety of different options. Okay. The first thing that I want to point out is the choose a set of permissions for board members. So these are like predefined groupings for different permission sets within Monday.com. So it's kind of like all access, less access, even less access, literally no access. Okay. And these are just predefined. So we can select an option, let's say only edit content. And then within that, we can then make changes and be more specific and nuanced to the things that they do and do not want to, or you do or do not want people to have access to. But just so I'm super clear, this applies to members associated with a particular board. So obviously you invite people to a board, they then become a member of that board, but they're not necessarily an owner. And as I'm sure you know, the crown, if I go to invite in the top right hand corner here, the crown dictates owners. To remove the last owner, you need to make someone else owner, blah, 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 blah. But then you can invite people to a board. They then have access to the board as a member, and then you would make them an owner of the board if you want them to have owner permissions for that particular board. If there's no crown, or it's just like not, if it's not blue, essentially, they're just a member of that particular board. So that's two key things to bear in mind. So three dotted button permissions, we've got our different permission sets, and this applies to members. Owners will always just have admin access unless you specify otherwise in the actual back end of Monday.com, which we'll come on to in this video. So you can see here, we've got our different groupings or different permission kind of groups. We've got items, sub-items, general updates, columns. And then we've got groups views and forms. Okay. So you can see here on my items, there's just some standard stuff like create items. Are we allowing all members to create items? Can they move items to other boards? Can they archive self-created items? Can they archive items created by other users? Can they delete self-created items, delete items created by other users? And can they change new items terminology? You can just untick and tick as you so wish. Okay, so let's say I don't want them to be able to delete or archive anything or change any item terminology. I don't want them to be able to move items to other boards. We can literally untick it. It's really, really simple. You'll also notice here we've got view items. We can customize this and just say only projects they created and items assigned to them in any people column. So you can select that. So if you only want your members to be able to see things that they've either created or been assigned to, then you can go ahead and customize that option here. So this is like the primary area that we make changes to, okay, just for item management. Now you will then notice on the left hand side we have got some different options. So if I then change this to only edit content, you can see that the change new items terminology gets grayed out. So this permission is not available under this permission set. So we'd have to select the higher or more flexible permission set. So you can see how that changes. As we then work through the permission sets, more and more stuff gets grayed out. So only edit assigned projects, for example, and then we can set them to view and comments. Then they can only view and comment projects that they've been assigned, and then we can customize that information. And then also if we go to only edit assigned projects, we can say they can only edit items they're assigned to. And then based on the person column, we can define the person column that allows them to edit that information as well. So as we work through the permission set, the flexibility becomes less. Obviously, it gets more and more strict. And this applies to literally everything. So if you want people to have access to everything, or you want better control, you would select edit everything and then untick, let's say, these different options here. Now, one thing to then be mindful of is if you then change it from edit everything to only edit content and then change it back to edit everything, it actually saves your selections, which is quite helpful. So you're in essence changing the permission set. And this would then apply to sub items as well. So you can see here that we've got sub items. Can they create sub items? So every member at the moment can create sub items, view sub items, edit sub items. They can archive and delete as well. Now, if we then either change the permission set by unticking options, we can then say that they can't delete anything, or we could go ahead and say that we could change the permission set, and you can see how this then changes as well. So please create sub items to enable this customization for the edit functionality. That's just for kind of like, because there are no sub items on this board. Change it to view and comment, only edit. We can only edit content, and then we can edit everything. Okay, so again, this is just a sweeping rule per different like categorizations, and then we have our permission set. So then we go to general. Now you might say that they can edit everything, but we don't want them to mess around with the integrations and automations. We don't want them messing around with the AI stuff. We don't want them to delete files or upload files. Or you could say they can upload files, but not from, let's say, their computer, for example. So you have a lot of comprehensive permission options here. And obviously, again, if we flick through the different permission sets, you can see what is and is not available as they change by defined sets. Again, we've got updates. So they can create updates, edit updates, delete updates. If I want them to only be able to view and comment, or only edit content, you can see how these change. Or I can just go ahead and unselect what they can and can't do. So they can create, they can edit, but they can't delete. Or we go the other way around. They create and edit, they can't delete, as you can see here. So you just keep working through what do and do not want people to be able to do here. So create columns, I'd probably say no. Edit column settings, no. Delete columns, no. Set columns as required, no. So even though they're a member, we still don't really want them interfering with like the key structure and setup of the system. Again, this is quite common for groups. I don't want people creating groups, moving groups, renaming groups, changing the color of group. I don't want anyone archiving anything. So if this was me setting up the system, I would want to limit as much access as possible to the architecture of the system, right? So then again, views, I don't want creating board views, deleting views, and then forms. I mean, you can, obviously this forms are slightly different, but if you do want people to be able to create forms, you can have that. If you don't want them to be able to mess around with things like regenerating URLs, I mean, that could break a whole system if you're heavily reliant on forms, then I would make sure that a lot of this is unselected. Now, of course, this would also change dependent on what you select with your permission set as well. So edit everything's the most flexible, and then it can be changed dependent on your permission set. I appreciate I'm probably repeating myself here, but hopefully this just gives you a good idea as to what's possible, and then also how flexible the permission setup within Monday.com Enterprise is. Now, within the professional version, I'm pretty sure you do still have some options like this. The key one though, and which everyone asks me about, is people being able to view items and then consequently only items that they're assigned or that they're responsible for. So you would say only projects that are created and assigned, and only projects they created and items assigned to them in any people column they're allowed to mess around with. So that's the view items functionality, because quite often people, especially on like a deals pipeline, for example, they don't want each other or different sales reps to be able to see each other's deals. That, again, I'll reiterate, applies to all members added. You can mess around with this to your heart's content. And that's how you would set up permissions within a board within Monday. I'm just going to close and discard the changes because obviously I don't want them to be applied. And then if I go to my initials in the top right hand corner and go to administration, I then have a permission set up in the administration of the system. This would mean you would obviously need to be an admin of the system. So if I go to permissions, we've then got admin, member, viewer, and guest. So for a guest, let's say, we can change, and this is system-wide, what guests do and don't have access to, okay? And the same for a viewer, the same for a standard member, and the same for an admin as well. Now, I would recommend, if you're an admin, not mess around with the admin settings, because you could literally lock yourself out of your own account. So I'd be careful about that. So if I say, I can't delete files or create workspaces, and that's going to create issues. So you've got a use a role, so an admin, so a new user gets created in your system. You then assign them a role, whether they're an admin or just a standard member or a viewer or a guest, and then you can define their permissions. Now, what you can do is you can create new roles as well. So you can create an example role, then base it on the standard member role, but then you tweak some changes. So like you might have a member and then you might have a super user. So that would sit between a member and an admin in terms of access. So an admin has access to everything. A super user, they might be just good at Monday.com. They might be, let's say, leading the way on a Monday.com implementation. So you create a super user. They have more access than a member, just a standard member, but less access than an admin. But it allows them to do a few additional things should they ever need to. So though we've got permissions on a system-wide level, and then we have permissions on a board level. This is system-wide. And then obviously if we go back, we'll go to our projects, for example, this is then as a consequence applied strictly to that particular board. Now, it does get even more nuanced as well, because what you can do is, let's say we have our profit here on our projects board. I don't want anyone really to be able to see our profit column. I could go to settings and I can either restrict the column editing for this particular column or restrict the column view. So if I say I restrict the column view, then only me, other people that have owner access, and other people that I assign that are members can view this particular column. So you have system-wide permissions, you have board permissions, and then you have column permissions as well. So let's say profit, only I can view it, or only owners can view it. And then I want to add, let's say, someone in the finance department to be able to see that as well. I can do. And then let's just say cost, for example. I don't want people to be able to edit it. So I can restrict the column editing for this particular column. So only me and other owners or other people that I want to be able to can make changes to this particular column. They can still see it, they can't change it. Whereas the profit column, only people that I want to be able to have permission to see it can see it. So if you're just a standard member without permission, this column is literally just not visible. So I appreciate it is quite complicated. I can say in certain terms that this is not nearly as complicated as Salesforce. So it's not that bad. I mean, I think this is actually a pretty good setup, quite a sensible approach by Monday.com. Company-wide permissions set up in the settings area. Board level permissions set up by owners of boards. Column level permissions, anyone can do that. Hopefully this all makes sense. Obviously mess around with stuff, make changes, change what you do and don't want people to see. My recommendation would just be to start on your board permissions first. The thing is, if you start changing permissions on your company wide or like your administrator level, like company or system wide settings, you might inadvertently lock people out of things that they did have access to and then don't, which can always be quite frustrating. So I would start and test things out on your board level, and as you become more confident with your permission setup, then expand to just making changes company wide. But hopefully this has been a good introduction to Monday.com's permission setup on the enterprise version. The professional version does have similar settings. There's just some limitations when you're going through the permission setup on here on a board level and also a company wide level. But either way, you will have the restrict column editing and the restrict column view on the column level inside of enterprise. I don't think you'll all get that on standard though. Cool. If you'd like us to help you set up Monday.com for your business, check out the link in the description below. Book a call with me and we can have a chat. Alternatively, if you've got questions, comments, requests, or anything else, drop a comment in the comment section below. I'll do my best to get back to you. If it's a really good question, I'll make a video on it. Anyway, thank you ever so much for watching. Appreciate this is a short, sweet video, but hopefully it's helpful. Thank you, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.